Welcome, Wapham crew, new listeners and watchers, friends, fiends, foes, whoever may be out there listening this evening beyond the Omniverse tonight. Secure your tinfoil hats, buckle down tight, and hold on loosely as we soar over the rocky tops of the La Platas on a rocky mountain high, get sucked into the vortex of the Four Corners, and settle down snugly at mile mark 420 in colorful Colorado. It is Sunday, September 24th, Monday, September 25th for those of you across the pond and beyond. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you, and welcome to We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. I'm your host, TessaTNT, and we are broadcasting live from the Mile High Clubhouse tonight. I hope you guys had an awesome weekend so far. I hope you got to catch the show last night. It was a very good show with Troy Bacon. If you didn't catch it, you should go back and watch it. If you're watching us live right now, you may be watching us on YouTube under We Are Paradox Media. You can also find us live on Facebook under We Are Paradox Media, as well as Twitch. And please go over to our YouTube channel and subscribe. Leave a like, leave any comments, whether good or bad, or even like any future guests you'd like to have on the show. I want to hear it. If you're listening to us live right now, you may be listening to us on KPNL Radio, which you can find on KPNL Radio at kpnl-db.com. You may also listen to us live at Spreaker as well as eTalk Radio, which you can find at etalk.tv/radio. If you want to listen to us in your free time, whether you're working it, or working out, just go tune in to us basically on any media that you like to listen to your podcasts on. And we'll be there. We Are Paradox Media. So tonight I have a treat for all my guys and gals out there. Tonight we have story time with me, TessaTNT, and then at the very end, we'll watch a creepy video. So I've been sending myself different videos randomly. I know, I believe it was last week we had an issue with the internet, but hopefully we got that all worked out, so we don't have that issue again. Let's keep our fingers, toes, hairs, and eyes crossed that that doesn't happen. So we shall be reading from, let me get this banner down. More of Hollywood's Unsolved Mysteries. So we've covered Elvis, so many different people. Some that I wasn't even aware of. Like some of these stories come from like the 1920s and such. So this chapter is called Dinner for Two and Death for One. So Carol and Dennis O'Keefe in a scene from Topper Returns for Hal Roke and United Artists. Look at that lovely couple. Here's a picture of Carol Landis dead on the floor of her bathroom. Her clothing contradicts Rex Harrison's recollection in his autobiography when he claimed that he discovered her body clad in a housecoat. And that's no housecoat. Poor girl. Chapter 6. The Tragic Death of Carol Landis. You fight so hard, and then what have you got to face? You begin to worry about being washed up. You get bitter and disillusioned. You fear the future because there's only one way to go, and that's down. And that was said by Carol Landis, April 1948. The death by natural causes, so to speak, of Sir Rex Harrison at the age of 82 in June 1990 recalled for us the time we covered, as the correspondent for a London newspaper. And not so natural death of beautiful 31-year-old film star Carol Landis. Even though he was to deny it later, Harrison was deeply involved with Carol, in fact up to the very night of her death. It was a sad drive to Carol's home on Capri Drive in Pacific Palisades that sunny late Monday afternoon of July 5th, 1948. Sad because Carol Landis was the same vivacious blonde who we had known so well in London and Algiers during World War II, while we were attached to SHAEF in Special Services for the Air Force. We had several lunches and dinners together in the wartime capital at the Duke Street U.S. Officers Club. In the days or evenings that Carol and her troupe of Kay Francis, Mitzi Mayfair, and Martha Ray were not performing at some base of the 8th Air Force, or an army encampment somewhere in England. as the old saying went. Carol was in England in a show sponsored by the USO and was later to write about her experiences in England, North Africa, and the South Pacific, called Four Jills in a Jeep. This was later filmed under the same title with the original Four Jills plus Betty Grable and Alice Faye at 20th Century Fox. On the afternoon of Sunday, July 4th, 1948, the 31-year-old Landis gave a swimming party for a number of close friends at her Capri drive home just a block or two from the fashionable Riviera Country Club. Carol was, her guests were to say later, in high spirits, swimming and laughing, and entertaining as if she did not have a care in the world, if only they had known. Just the opposite was true, as those same friends were to find out in the days and weeks to follow. After the last of her guests had left at around 6 p.m. on the bright sunny afternoon, Carol Landis went up to her large and well-furnished bedroom to change. She had a dinner date that evening with Harrison in her home, one of many cozy dinners they had shared together in the Capri Drive house over the past months, while Harrison was busy filming The Foxes of Harrow for Daryl F. Zanuck at 20th Century Fox, just a short drive from Pacific Palisades. Landis donned a white silk blouse, a flaring black and white checkered skirt, golden sandals, but no stockings. And there's a little asterisk there. It says, to illustrate the callousness of Rex Harrison many years after her death in his autobiography, Rex, he described a completely different outfit. He wrote, I saw Carol lying on the floor in a housecoat. This despite the fact that the 3 local newspapers ran pictures of Carol as she lay on the bathroom floor, which distinctly showed the black and white skirt, blouse, and sandals. It was to be a dinner alone for Harrison and Carol, for Sunday was Fannie Mae Bolden's day off, Carol's live-in maid for the past several weeks. It was also to be the last dinner on Earth for Carol Landis, and it was said later, Rex Harrison had a lot to do with her demise at such an early age. She was pretty, she was blonde, and they said later that she was doomed from the start. Her real name was Frances Lillian Mary Ritz, of Polish stock from Wisconsin. Her father had abandoned the family when she was a youngster, and her mother moved her brood to San Diego, California, and later to San Bernardino, 60 miles west of Los Angeles on the old Route 66. She later changed her name to Carol Landis after her favorite star, Carol Lombard. The Landis, it was said, was her mother's maiden name. Carol had to learn the hard way, unfortunately, that happiness does not necessarily accompany stardom, a lesson which has been learned by so many Hollywood stars, both male and female. While attending San Bernardino High School, she realized that in order to pursue her lifelong ambition of becoming an actress, she would have to start somewhere else other than San Bernardino, and not necessarily in Hollywood. She had to have some experience before attempting to crash the studio gates. Local beauty contests were a start. She quit school, and with what money she had saved from odd jobs, headed for San Francisco. Her start was at the Royal Hawaiian Cafe as a hula dancer, a job she bluffed her way into, lying about her age, 15. But the confidence that she experienced there was enough to get her started. Eventually, she joined the big band of Ka Ravaza at the Rio Del Mar Country Club south of San Francisco as a singer. But Carol Landis never lost sight of Hollywood as her goal. After saving $100, a goodly sum in those days of 7-cent bread and milk at 7 cents a quart, she knocked on Filmland's door. It opened, but very slowly. On January 24, 1934, at the age of 16, Carol met and married actor-writer Irving Willer, then 19. Finally, whether through Willer or not is unknown, she got a break. Busby Berkeley was casting dancers for a Warner Brothers film for Varsity Show, and she was picked by Berkeley, who knew her husband as an extra in the film. When the female star refused to dance solo, Carol got the assignment. It was also rumored, then and later, that offstage, Carol Landis, in spite of being married, was bestowing her favors upon Berkeley. Wheeler later sued the famed choreographer for alienation of affections, a very common lawsuit in those days until it was outlawed. Wheeler asked for $250,000 but lost the case, and Carol won her divorce and a contract at $50 per week from Warner Brothers. She was featured in Blondes at Work with Glenda Farrell and in Hollywood Hotel. Many more pictures were to follow for Warner Brothers, Republic, and several independents. It was also said that Berkeley asked Carol to marry him. Following the role of the ingenue in a Schubert musical on Broadway, Carol's only commercial venture on the stage, Hal Roach signed her for $1 million BC. With Victor matured and wrapped her in a loincloth. This was followed by a featured role in Topper Returns, also from Roach. Then came a big break for Carol. She signed a contract with 20th Century Fox through the auspices of famed studio head Darryl F. Zanuck. It was then that the rumors and accusations began in the drawing rooms, country clubs, and watering holes. Her films at Fox included Moon Over Miami, Dance Hall, Hot Spot, and Cadet Girl. There was also Roadshow Wintertime, one of Sonia Haney's annual ice extravaganzas, Having Wonderful Crime, After the Thin Man, and several others well worth forgetting. But in 1942 came My Gal Sal. It happened in Flatbush, Orchestra Wives, and Manila Calling, and her longed-for career toward stardom was on the move. Her first marriage to Wheeler had lasted 25 days, but on July 4th, 1940, Carol married again. This time to yachtsman Willis Hunt Jr., a yacht broker and Los Angeles society figure. This marriage lasted 2 months, and she received her divorce after informing a Los Angeles judge that Hunt had told her, "You're a fool, just like everybody else in the moving picture business." Following the divorce, Carol decided she needed a change and signed up with the USO for overseas tour that was to continue for a year. It was while in London, however, that she became a bride for the third time. He was Major Tom Wallace, a former member of the Eagle Squadron of Royal Air Force, who switched to the 8th Air Force when America entered the war. They were married in London in 1942. 2 years later, Carol divorced Wallace in Las Vegas, and the records were sealed. Carol Landis was to have one more chance at finding happiness in a marriage, but not to the one man she craved above all others. This ultimately led to her death. This, and many believe another compelling reason. Those accusations about her early days in San Francisco as well as her stardom in Hollywood and how it was attained. Because her roles in many of her pictures were similar to those of her idol, Carole Lombard, she was pinpointed by many as the natural successor to the Madcap Lombard. The then wife of Clark Gable Lombard was killed in a TWA plane crash in Las Vegas in 1942. Carol Landis had a style that was, many believe, imposed upon her by many of her wartime experiences. She wore casual clothes and, at one dinner with us at the Duke Street Officers Club, she wore jeans, lumberjack shirt, and a Harris tweed jacket. But because she wore the casual attire so well and with a flair, no one objected. Rex Harrison said in his autobiography that Carol was quite ambitious and wanted to make films, for reasons I never got to the bottom of. She couldn't during the time I knew her. She couldn't get into any major studio. Only the independents would hire her along with British producers for those awful quota quickies. But, added Harrison, those were the days of the drawing rooms of Beverly Hills and Bel Air. The wealthy Hollywood ranchers and so-called ladies, none of whom considered Carol a lady. Harrison apparently had not heard the rumors about Carol and the bottom to which he could never get to. Nevertheless, while Carol Landis was working her tail off in USO camp shows and developing a case of malaria in the South Pacific, from which she never completely recovered, those ladies of Hollywood were attending social events, afternoon teas at the Riviera Country Club, volunteering a few hours a week at the USO in Hollywood, all the while bemoaning the fact they couldn't find any good servants. Because of the war, Japanese domestics had all been interned. Many of the cattier Hollywood wives spread the rumors that Carol Landis had made it from bit player to leading lady under the sponsorship of various movie land males in a position to help her, including her long-ago friend with Busby Berkeley. This in addition to that rumor about her early days in San Francisco, a rumor which had been depressing her for several years. Many of those so-called ladies who made those statements and spread the rumors had followed the same road to stardom, or into those drawing rooms or ranch houses as the wives of executives or actors they were accusing Carol of following. Hypocrisy at its, aka Hollywood's worst. Hey, Adrian. They were also jealous of Carol's popularity with the press, the crews, and with fellow actors. They were envious that Carol could tell a good joke, often on herself. In Hollywood, Fame's door had opened and closed for Carol Landis, to all intents and purposes, shutting her out of any major studio work because of nasty, ugly accusations spread by those long-ago bitches of the industry. Some, incidentally, are still alive and, if they read this, will know what we are talking about. It was these women who had used their influence with their husbands, the movers and shakers of the industry, to wind down Carol's career. That drawing room crowd forever prevented Carol from becoming the great star she could have been under different circumstances. She was the right girl at the wrong time, and was well aware of those rumors and accusations, and that she could not overcome them. To have denied them publicly would have made it worse. They were well aware of this and capitalized on it, to Carol's detriment. Hedda Hopper was one of those bitches to whom we refer and who considered herself the moral czar of Hollywood, along with Luella Parsons. Hopper hinted at them in one or even more of her columns. This then was the mood, the atmosphere, and the psyche under which Carol Landis was laboring while she prepared dinner for herself and Rex Harrison on that fatal Sunday night. It was to be the last dinner on this planet for Carol Landis. Because of his cavalier attitude following her death, Harrison never fully recovered his stature with the British colony in Hollywood. The members all considered him a cad for not taking his licks and admitting his affair with Carol. And it was to be a hell of a long time before he was to ever make another film in Hollywood. Rex Harrison considered himself on Easy Street and on top of the world when he and his wife, Lily Palmer, moved from England to Hollywood's in the late 1940s. Little did they ever envision leaving Hollywood under a cloud less than 3 years later, and that they would be at the center of one of Hollywood's biggest scandals until that time. Lily Palmer said many years later that almost as soon as they arrived in Tinseltown, where Rex had been set to star in several films for 20th Century Fox, all the so-called ladies in Hollywood threw themselves into his arms. Rex was not one to resist the temptations, she added. One woman was not enough for Rex. He just couldn't be faithful. He'd see some women, she would flutter her eyelashes, and he'd believe that he'd fallen head over heels in love with her. It was just his personality, she remarked. Lily Palmer accepted Rex Harrison's occasional infidelities. She knew they were purely physical conquests, which never, it seemed, altered the way that Rex felt toward her. Then came Carol Landis. They first met at the Racket Club in Palm Springs, introduced by one of its owners, Charlie Farrell. They were immediately attracted to each other. This was to continue unabated for months in Hollywood and in England. At the time, Carol was married to her fourth husband, Horace Schmidlap, a supposed New York millionaire. The marriage for Carol, however, turned out to be a Dutch treat affair. As Schmidlap lived in New York and Carol in California, she paid most of her own California living expenses. Rex Harrison quickly succumbed to Carol's charms and immediately embarked on another adventure. Gossip arose very quickly about their extramarital activities as they continued their romance. Their affair was becoming more and more widely known. Harrison, who loathed the press anyways, found himself becoming increasingly challenged about the relationship. Because there was very little work for Carol in Hollywood in late 1947, she went to London after being offered 2 films by British producer Edward Dryhurst, The Noose and The Brass Monkey, 2 quota quickies for the British market. With Carol as one of the stars, these could also be released in the US. Handily for both, Harrison was also assigned by 20th Century Fox to star in Escape in England as one of Fox's annual British productions. The picture was filmed almost entirely on location near Dartmoor, and Harrison had rented a cottage in Plymouth. Lily Palmer remained in Hollywood with their son Cary. Because of this, Carol and Harrison were able to spend most weekends together in Plymouth, away from the prying eyes of Britain's tabloid press. And this was the man who denied, following Carol's death, that they had been having an affair, that they were just good professional friends. Besides, he added, Carol is a good friend of my wife. On returning to Hollywood, Rex would constantly visit Carol at her Capri Drive house, only a few minutes away from his and Palmer's home in Mandeville Canyon. This finally and inexorably led to a quarrel between Lily and Harrison. She decided to visit friends in New York. The only witness to Harrison's not-so-discreet visits was Fannie Mae Bolden. Bolden was to say later that she had no doubt that Carol was deeply in love with Rex. She would make me so mad because he would be eating his meal and she would just sit there watching him, and he would be eating just like a dog, like it was going out of style. Carol Landis was obsessed with Rex Harrison, but the romance was going nowhere. She took numerous photographs of him, which she developed herself in the darkroom in her house. Because she developed them herself, one must conjecture as to the type of photographs some of them might have been. So here's a couple pictures. One is of Rex Harrison and his then-wife Lily Palmer 3 years after Carol's suicide. They are pictured at Columbia Studios, where both were appearing in the Stanley Kramer Company production of The Four-Poster. This was to be Harrison's first picture in Hollywood, and 3.5 years following Carol Landis' suicide. And then below we have Carol Landis at 8th Air Force Headquarters at Bushy Park just outside of London. So left to right, it's Missy Mayfair, Martha Ray, Kay Francis, Carol, and 2 U.S. Army officers, attached to the Special Services Division in spite of their lapel insignia. These were the 4 Jills in a Jeep, the subject of a book by Carol and a 20th Century Fox film. So there's those pictures. And that's Carol. Here's another picture, or 2. So Carol with 8th Air Force Major Gus Damon at Ciro's in Hollywood on Carol's return from the ETO following a USO tour to London. And then down below, director Busby Berkeley, one of Carol's early lovers at Warner Brothers and who gave her her first film break. He is shown here on the set of Eddie Cantor film 40 Little Mothers. Fannie Bolden recalled 3 or 4 years ago in another interview, she had pictures of him all over the wall of her bedroom. According to Bolden, Carol fully expected Rex Harris to divorce Lily Palmer and marry her. Approaching 31 at the time and with a failing career because of those rumors and accusations being made by the bitches of Bel Air, she felt it was time to settle down and have children. There's an asterisk by that too, and it said, many years later, Rex Harrison said that he was very taken with Carol's all-American spirit and sense of humor and freedom. He said she was a feminist long before the launching of women's liberation movement. That this was something else about Carol which upset the drawing room crowd. So what was obvious to everyone, at least to those of her inner circle who knew of the affair, was that Rex Harrison was the wrong choice for her future happiness and security. He did not want to lose the stability that his marriage to Lily gave to his life, and Lily, he was sure, never regarded Carol as a threat to their marriage. He realized that he would soon have to decide where his future lay, a fact of which Carol was equally aware that July 4th as she prepared dinner for herself and Harrison. She made his decision clear during the evening and told Carol that he had accepted the leading role in a New York play and would be leaving California for many months. Little did he know how many. Carol had reached the end of her rope, both financially and emotionally. She had no work in sight. She had sold her house, her car, and dismissed her press agent because she couldn't afford to pay him. The bills were piling up, and escrow would not close on her house for several weeks. She had filed for divorce earlier in the year from Schmidlap, and her attorney, Jerry Geisler, had worked out a property settlement between them. All Carol would get was the proceeds from the Capri Drive house, which would just about pay all of her debts. About 9 o'clock on Sunday night, July 4th, Rex Harrison said he left Carol's house to visit Roland Culver, another of Hollywood's British contingent, who lived nearby. Harrison wanted to talk to Culver about the play he was going to do for Leland Hayward in New York. In his autobiography, Harrison wrote, "I went to Carol's for supper and I discussed the play with her. She thought it was marvelous, but upset at my leaving California. She seemed a little down, but I'm afraid I didn't realize or notice the extent of her depression. I left Roland's about 1 a.m., went home and called Carol to say goodnight. At the back of my mind, I felt she sounded a little strange, but I made nothing very much of it." The next day, Monday, Harrison spent practically the entire morning and through lunch discussing Anne of the Thousand Days with playwright Maxwell Anderson in Malibu. When I got home, I called Carol to tell her I was back. The maid answered and said she knocked on Carol's door a couple of times, but with no response. I thought and hoped she might have gone out, but I felt a little worried, so I drove around to the house and rang the bell. I tried the door just as Carol's maid was about to open it. It was then that Harrison started to panic when he discovered Carol lying on the floor of her bathroom, with her head resting on a light brown jewel box. His immediate thoughts must have been, "Scandal time, old boy, brace yourself," with no thoughts for the soul of Carol Landis. His later lies and actions bore this out. Just what were those rumors and accusations that the establishment ladies had been making about Carol, which were depressing her, destroying her Hollywood career? When Carol left for San Francisco after winning a couple of beauty contests in San Bernardino, she had $16 and change and her Greyhound bus ticket. From that moment on, her life in San Francisco was clouded in mystery and rumors of a mysterious past. This came up several times when she was asked about it by reporters, but she always changed the subject. This mysterious past was talked about and embellished on the Bel Air circuit for years. The stories that she had been a teenage call girl for the owner of the Royal Hawaiian Cafe were passed around as fact. It was known that the cafe was a tourist trap and, it was said, gave her the opportunity to meet and entertain lonely tourists and conventioneers, which paid her far more than dancing the hula. Or so the accusations went. These rumors snowballed into character assassination, that she had also become Busby Berkeley's mistress while working at Warner Bros., and that he had pulled some strings with Jack Warner to get her that stock contract. Carol was once questioned about these and other rumors, and the ones which upset her the most. "Anyone in public life," she replied, "gets used to unkind rumors after a time, though all of them are very upsetting when they are published and spoken about publicly, particularly by those in the business who are, shall I say, jealous of your success. I've learned to stand up to them by ignoring them and not dignifying them with an answer." But it was while she was at 20th Century Fox that the accusations ended Carol's career in Hollywood. At least to all intents and purposes with the major studios surfaced. They were not pleasant. Most of them were vicious lies. Darryl F. Zanuck was noted for playing matinees in his back office around 3:30 every afternoon, with the contract player of his choice. Darryl signed the check, so to speak, and decided which options were picked up every 6 months. Because of this power, there was reticence, but seldom an argument, if any young lady he decided she had a headache or some other ailment. On the day Daryl decided she would come to his office for a story conference or to discuss future projects. Nearly everyone in the know at the studio claimed that Zanuck called on the busty, lusty Carol 2 or 3 times a week for the traditional rite of passage, entered into by many of the female contract players at the studio. The accusations were also made by her detractors that Carol had been having an affair with Jacqueline Susan, a press agent who later wrote Valley of the Dolls, and 2 other forgettable novels. All, however, were bestsellers but became so-so films at 20th Century Fox. The accusations were also made to put a spin on the story, that Zanuck somehow preferred women who themselves preferred or enjoyed women. In those days, homosexuality and lesbianism were frowned upon by the strict moral code of the industry and were rarely mentioned in polite circles. But the bitches of Bel Air did not move in polite circles. Nevertheless, Carol Landis' detractors kept them going until she could no longer obtain work at any of the major studios or few independents. No one has ever been able to understand why this was done to her. It was a known fact that many other actors and actresses had led far more dissolute lives than Carol Landis ever had. The accusations and rumors ruined a career which could have put Carol in the forefront as a popular, much-in-demand leading lady. But fate and Rex Harrison, loathed by practically everyone in Hollywood for his standoffish attitude, decreed otherwise for Carol Landis on the night of July 4th through 5th, 1948. And it destroyed Rex Harrison's Hollywood career for many, many years. When Harrison discovered Carol laying on the bathroom floor around 3:30 p.m., he momentarily paused before calling for Fannie Mae Bolden to join him. He obviously wanted a witness to his actions from then on. In his autobiography, he wrote, "I first thought she might have fainted, and I went over and tried to pick her up. My one thought was, how could I bring her back? She was cold, she was gray, and to all intents and purposes, she was dead. Nevertheless, I tried everything, holding her, moving her, shouting her name. I bent down and thought I felt her breath. I tried her pulse. I couldn't believe she was dead. I had had no experience with a dead person." Harrison then went to the phone beside the bed and saw the note Carol had left behind. A pencil-written note on her monogrammed stationery, and addressed it to her mother. "Dearest Mommy, I'm sorry, really sorry to put you through this, but there's no way to avoid it. I love you, darling. You have been the most wonderful mom ever, and that applies to all our family. I love each and every one of them dearly. Everything goes to you. Look in the files, and there is a will which decrees everything. Goodbye, my angel. Pray for me." With a pencil she scrawled her name, but not her name, but your baby. Harrison claimed in Rex that there was no other note, but it was reported that she had left behind a separate note for him, that he pocketed it before anyone else could see it. He foresaw a scandal brewing, and the studio had to be notified. But first he asked Fannie Mae Bolden to help find Carol's address book to see if he could locate the name of one of her doctors. He never told anyone why he didn't just call the police or an ambulance. After going through the book fruitlessly, or so he said, he got into his car and drove to his own home as fast as he could to get the telephone number of his own doctor. And there's an asterisk by that says Harrison never explained, nor was he asked, why he didn't just ask information for the number for Carol's telephone instead of wasting time with the 15 or 20-minute drive to his Mandeville Canyon house. It is believed that he took the time to not only call his doctor but the studio and probably a lawyer, calls he did not want to make in front of Fannie Mae Bolden. At this point, he claimed, later, he did not realize that Carol was past resuscitation. He eventually reached his doctor's assistant, whom said it would take him at least a half an hour to go to Carol's home. I rang the Culvers, who lived nearby, and asked if they knew a doctor in the area. They suggested I ring St. John's Hospital in Santa Monica. and the police if she had taken an overdose. I reported to the hospital and the police that I had found Carol and that she needed immediate assistance. By the time Harrison returned to the house on Capri Drive, the police had arrived and had been led in by Fannie Mae. Harrison spoke briefly to the police of finding her body and told them that he had dinner with Carol. Where did it go? Who was just a good friend the night before. I left her about 9 p.m. She had been in good spirits, and I cannot understand why she did this. He then left the house hastily through the French doors, over a backyard fence, and then by a circuitous route through the neighborhood, eventually reaching his car unseen. He had spotted the reporters and radio newsmen arriving at the house while talking to the police in the living room of the Landis home. He did not wish to see them until he had discussed the situation with 20th Century Fox. He could not afford a scandal at this stage of his career. When the news of Carol Landis' death broke in the press on Tuesday morning, July 6, Hollywood was stunned at the circumstances. Most people agreed she was a happy girl who loved life and laughter. Every one of her close circle of friends called her a good scout, and she was adored by the crews of the pictures on which she worked, not only in Hollywood but also in London, where she had made several pictures. What got Hollywood upset over the tragedy was that Carol had at one time been one of the town's most popular personalities, and at the same time, Rex Harrison, one of its most loathed actors. He had snobbishly refused to cooperate with the press, who retaliated by sticking needles into both Harrison and his pictures. Harrison also alienated every technician and actor on his sets at 20th. The Hollywood Reporter wrote about Harrison. We don't remember an actor, foreign or domestic, who has breached so many rules of good taste in his conduct among fellow workers. The wonder of the whole thing is that he hasn't had his face smashed in before now. If Harrison had few friends before the circumstances of the death of Carol Landis become known, he had nothing but enemies when they were learned. True, Carol had been scandalized by the doyens of the industry, but the run-of-the-mill employees who themselves could not understand why she was being ostracized and maligned immediately condemned Harrison. The only people who sprang to Harrison's side, and that was to protect their investment in the Foxes of Harrow and Escape, were the studio press agents under orders from Harry Brand, whose wife Sybil was one of the leaders of the Bel Air circuit, but one of the very few, as far as could be ascertained, who kept her mouth shut about Carol's past. While the Hollywood press corps tried to dig up the facts, the press agents, through threats of advertising boycotts, tried to bury them in at least the local press. Lily Palmer was hastily summoned from New York to discount the rumors that flew thick and fast throughout Hollywood via Jungle Telegraph. One top columnist, who had poured invective upon Harrison for months, Hedda Hopper, openly reported, with what truth is not known, that there was indeed a second note left by Carol and that Harrison had pocketed it when he fled the house in a blue funk, ostensibly to obtain the telephone number of his doctor. In another column, Hopper wrote, obviously attempting to undo her guilty conscience of maligning Carol in earlier columns. Carol had been deeply in love with a man who was forced to tell her that nothing could come of their romance. Lily Palmer arrived back in Hollywood via American Airlines within 12 hours after she had been so frantically summoned by Harry Brand, who had taken charge of damage control for the studio. On Wednesday, 2 days after he discovered the body, Rex Harrison stepped from behind the studio curtain it had thrown up for him for 24 hours. The press was waiting on his doorstep as he emphasized, Carol Landis was not in love with me. And this was a blatant lie, as everyone was aware. That is all pure Hollywood gossip. You know what that is. He continued the lies during the entire press conference and added, Carol never told me she loved me. He was then asked what they discussed during their dinner together on that Sunday night. We talked of our plans for the future, my play, and a picture Carol had been signed for in England in September. Is that all you talked about for 2 hours? He was asked. That's all the comment I'm going to make, he said in his most imperious British accent. With that, the butler came out and called him to the telephone. The door was closed, while reporters milled about making and comparing notes. Their patience was rewarded because 10 minutes later, Harrison came out, but this time accompanied by his wife. I am terribly upset about Miss Landis's death, said Lily Palmer. I met her many times in London, and we went to several parties together. I never came to her house here, as I am unknown in Hollywood. We shall both attend her funeral. Everyone could sense that everything was over between Rex and Lily Harrison, that here was a woman bravely standing by her husband to save his face and his reputation. They were soon to be divorced. So this is gossip columnist Peter Hopper. When her body was found on the bathroom floor, Carol was clutching a small brown envelope with the imprint of Carlton House, 22 East 47th Street, New York. On the envelope, scrawled in ink, were the words, red, quick, 2 hours, yellow, about 5, can take 2. This was not in her handwriting, but was obviously written by a doctor. The autopsy showed they were sleeping pills. How many were in that little brown envelope of death was not known. There was one little white pill left in it when Harrison discovered her body. Dr. Maynard Brandsma, Carol's personal physician, told the coroner that he had given her prescriptions for amoebic dysentery, contracted while she was in North Africa during World War II, and he knew that she suffered from recurring bouts of malaria, which sometimes interfered with her work. I gave her no sleeping pills of any kind, he said. If Carol Landis had not taken her own life over an unrequited love affair with Harrison, what then was the reason? That was what both the police and the hundreds of people in Hollywood who knew and loved Carol, the little men, the technicians, the publicists, and her fan club wanted to know. Carol's mother, Clara Landis, heartbrokenly told what she felt. My baby Carol had had her troubles, she said in Carol's house 3 days after her daughter's death. She had married a rich man, but she was in deep financial trouble. She had sold this house, her car, her home, little things in order to keep going until she got work again. Work that was being denied her because of nasty, scurrilous rumors. Things had been piling up for her. She told me of her financial worries despite her marriage to Horace Schmidlap, a rich man. Why, only a short time ago, in bitterness, she said to me, Mother, marry a rich man and then support yourself. A month ago I was staying with her when she called Mr. Schmidlap long distance. She started talking to him at midnight and finished at 2 a.m. I heard her say, You know, I never spent a cent of yours except on the house and expenses. I know she offered to pay him back for a fur coat. Carol Landis, for all her outward gaiety, never found happiness. Her final try came when she married Schmidlap in 1945 in New York. She once said she wore her heart on her sleeve. In March 1948, 4 months before her death, she had arrived back from filming The Noose and promptly filed suit for divorce against him on the grounds of cruelty. Was this because she had fallen desperately in love with Harrison and hoped eventually to marry him? Could this scenario have been discussed during their weekends together in Plymouth? The answers to those and other questions were never answered. On hearing of her death, Schmidlap immediately flew to Hollywood. In his suite at the Bel Air Hotel, he emphatically denied all the charges leveled at him by Carol's mother. Her charge that I failed to support Carol properly is absurd and ridiculous, he said. During the 2.5 years of our marriage, I paid for everything. A house that cost over $100,000, boat, train, and plane fares because we were living all over the country and a lot of the time in England. I paid all her household expenses and clothing. There was a time in London when she did buy some clothes with her own money. Carol did not want for anything. Of course, I stopped paying as soon as she filed for divorce. I am completely dissatisfied at her suicide. I cannot see why she should have taken her own life. I spoke to her last week by telephone, and she was in high spirits. but I had not seen Carol since January in London. Rex Harrison and Lily Palmer were among the 2 stars who attended the funeral at Forest Lawn Cemetery, but it was the public who provided the spectacle. Hundreds arrived 4 hours ahead of time. They came on foot, in buses, in cars, in taxis. They saw Harrison and his wife enter the chapel just minutes before the services began, a down-to-earth trooper's funeral in the church of the Recessional. With the Harrisons was Rex's only close friend in Hollywood, Roland Culver, accompanied by Agent Jack Bolton. The 5 entered the chapel through a side door and into a semi-private room close to the gleaming white casket. Lily Palmer walked ahead, Harrison between Culver and Bolton. Following the church service, all 5 left the cemetery before the casket was closed and borne to the gravesite on the slopes of an evergreen-shaded hill for burial. Schmidlap was swept aside by the vulgar, gawking crowd as he tried to reach his assigned chair at the graveside. Instead, he stood with bowed head on the fringe of the crowd, still jostling and pushing forward as Carol Landis disappeared from view into the earth of Forest Lawn Cemetery. Her final credit was Carol Landis, 1917 to 1948. Her grave, with a simple marker, is on the Forest Lawn tour. There was to be one final bizarre twist of the death of Carol Landis, which was only revealed by Harrison many years later in his autobiography. In the evening following the discovery of Carol's body, the actor retreated to Culver's on the instructions of the studio in order to hide out. On his arrival, he was given 2 small suitcases. They had been found by a visitor of the Culvers just outside a little used gate in the lane alongside the house when they arrived for cocktails on Monday, a few hours before Harrison showed up, wrote Harrison. Carol must have left them there while I was with Culver's the night she took her life, for it contained all the letters I had ever written to her, along with other personal mementos, gifts I had given her, and photographs of me and of us together. Carol had evidently taken them out of the house to prevent my being embarrassed by them. It was typical of Carol's sweet nature to act so thoughtfully when she was obviously in such an appalling state of mind. If the press or the police had discovered those letters, what whooping and jubilant screams would have gone up from the Hearst Press and other newspapers determined to increase their circulation at the expense of her tragedy. All were later burned. So ended the tragedy of Carol Landis, a bright young star of the Hollywoods, a rebel and a feminist long before it became fashionable. The questions about her suicide will always remain with us about her untimely death. Why was Carol Landis singled out by the bitches of Bel Air for those vicious, unfounded rumors and accusations? How did Carol deliver the suitcase of Harrison's letters to the Culvers? Why did Carol never publicly denounce the accusations against her? Could there have been a spark of truth or partial truth to some of them, and she was afraid they would further harm her career? To set one of those rumors to rest, if she had been one of Darryl Zanuck's afternoon mistresses, then her contract would never have been allowed to lapse at Fox. She was the only one of the Zanuck's many mistresses who had any talent, or was pressure put to bear on Zanuck by outside influences, not to renew her contract. Why did Rex Harrison continually lie about his affair with Carol Landis? It was common knowledge, and he would have been held in a little higher regard if he had admitted to having had an affair with her. Instead, he was ostracized and did not work in Hollywood for many years. Or did she commit suicide because she was 2 months pregnant with Rex Harrison's child? In his own callous way, we have learned from someone very close to Carol, Harrison told her, "I'm a married man, and you'll have to deal with it yourself." This was the real reason for the complete cover-up of the reason for Carol Landis' suicide as engineered by Harry Brandt and the Fox publicity staff. They realized that in those days, when Ingrid Bergman had been run out of town on a rail by Hedda Hopper over her unwed pregnancy, this could kill Harrison at the box office and the Foxes of Harrow, in which Harrison was starring. Even though Carol Landis was singled out for many unfounded accusations and rumors, she still had been a dues-paying member of the oligarchy, for several years, and many members rallied to her defense by ostracizing Harrison. They were well aware of the true story behind Carol's unfortunate suicide. Rex Harrison had not only bucked the oligarchy in many ways, including snobbery and ignoring the tenets of the industry, but his biggest mistake was totally avoiding and refusing to cooperate with the Hollywood press corps and studio publicists, long before the Landis affair exploded and forced him to deal with it on their terms. Nevertheless, regardless of the moral aspect, the big mystery is why Carol was the target for those rumors and accusations when most of them were never verified or proven. This will always have to remain one of Hollywood's unsolved mysteries. Next is Marilyn Monroe and JFK, the cover-up which won't go away. So we'll be reading that for the second hour. Right now we have to go to our first music break. So on this music break we have Mr. Jeff Hilliard, and he'll be singing Finger Bang Your Day, Consensual Sex Fan, Cock That Heals, Multitude, as well as Silicone Wave. You guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this music break.
When your life is a never-ending train wreck, and you feel like you're drowning in a sea of regret, with a bit of oppression pressing down on your neck, it hurts so bad. When your overwhelming hatred kills your heart's desire, and reality starts looking like a dumpster fire, you start bitching to me, but you're preaching to the choir. You don't need to be so mad, 'cause sometimes we hurt, sometimes we cry, sometimes we're sure there's no reason to try. When the whole world goes completely insane, open your heart, stand up and sing. I'm gonna finger bang my day. Yeah, yeah, I'll finger bang my day. That's right. You gotta make the choice to give it all you've got, and make your day long with pleasure, really make it hot. Because your day deserves a lover that pulls out the stops. Come on, it's not so hard. 'Cause sometimes we hurt, sometimes we cry, sometimes we're sure there's no reason to try. When the whole world blows up in our face, what else could we do but stand up and sing? I'm gonna finger bang my day. Yeah, yeah, finger bang my day. Hey, what are we really doing? We can't live in a world that has this much hate. We have to get honest with ourselves. We have to take stock in what our part is in all of this madness. We have to let go, and we focus on giving love, setting that intention. And each and every single one of us gets up every day with the intention to give love. And we do it. We go out there and we give love every single day. Each one of us gets out there and makes love to our day, giving our day a multiple orgasm. The whole world will be orgasmic for the rest of eternity. Sometimes we hurt, sometimes we cry, sometimes we're sure there's no reason to try. When the whole world is fucking insane, we open our hearts, stand up and sing. I'm gonna finger bang my day. let's go. Just get in the van.
Desperate and pathetic, nothing but a coward. You're a fool with nothing to offer. No one will ever believe you. They see you for what you are. You're just a fraud, a shell of a person. And now the power of the spirit of penetrate the demons that have you. They enslave you into the dungeon of the hate. I am the son of God.
I got Mola moves, got that Mola too. You think it's wrong? Back of the head too long. Fuck that. Check these Mola moves. You need a Mola too. I can do no wrong. Back of the head long, never gonna cut it.
All these hookers sweet on me. Look at them chasing me, showing me that ass. And I bagged up to snatch. I do this shit for free. Go down your mom till 3. She's taking selfies with the mullet like it's history. How can I maneuver you with that pussy, dude? You sit like Buddha waiting on it to come to you. My lines are straight to the point. She shows me gratitude. So what's your latitude? Yes, it's just your attitude. Hit up with a alligator, double dually Lamborghini. All up in a silly little yellow polka dot bikini.
I got more than moves, I got that molar too. You think it's wrong, back of the head too long. Fuck that.
Hit up with a alligator, double dually Lamborghini. All up in a silly little yellow polka dot bikini.
Check these molar moves, you need a molar too. I can do no wrong, back of the head, I'm gonna cut it.
Hit up with a alligator, double dually Lamborghini. All up in a silly little yellow polka dot bikini. You're like the butt of a butter knife cutting up panini. So climb back in your kangaroo pouch like a rolling genie. These moves are hot, these locks I got. This power cannot be disputed and it can't be bought. So you can find me in the studio with all these thoughts. You wanna bite my style, but you can't be what you're not, neighbor.
I got more than moves, I got that molar too. You think it's wrong, back of the head too long. Fuck that. Check these molar moves, you need a molar too. I can do no wrong, back of the head, I'm gonna cut it.
Yeah. Next time you come around here with your bitch ass, just remember how my mullet makes your hose pussy drip, drip, drip.
I got molar moves, I got that molar too. You think it's wrong, back of the head too long. Fuck that. Check these molar moves, you need a molar too. I can do no wrong, never gonna cut it. I got molar moves, I got that molar too. You think it's wrong, back of the head too long. Fuck that. Check these molar moves, you need a molar too. I can do no wrong, back of the head, I'm never gonna cut it. Never gonna cut it. Never gonna cut it.
Drip, drip,
Molar moves,
Just a molar, bitch.
molar moves,
drip, drip.
molar moves. Never gonna cut it.
I just got a package, I can't wait to get home. I spent all day tracking the shipment on my phone, all that she was lacking. I ordered custom, I can't wait to get some. Take it to the bedroom, bitches always nagging. Now I got the air, I send the bitches packing. Going my way, I have a new attraction. Don't care what you say, it's better in every way. Now baby, it's time to play. We're gonna make us a tape and show everyone the way. Cause I'm going cause I'm going my way, riding up Silicon Way. I see on the game with my new real dog. I'm gonna play just second way to my Silicon Way. She is here to stay. She's my new real dog, and it's time to play.
Nilizia tecila ryblo nipple.
Like living on a super yacht, making love to a robot. It's like
Angels in his teeth.
Following her wedding, Jolton Joe DiMaggio, who was the latter who arranged for Marilyn's funeral and internment at Westwood Memorial Park. Two mysteries was January 1990. Many more facts have come to light on the still unsolved mystery of the death of Marilyn Monroe. Published in January by Joe Kennedy. The end of the late FBI. Folk is also knowledgeable of Kennedy's plans to replace him as FBI chief with the highly regarded Lily White, police chief of Los Angeles, on his liaisons with Marilyn. Hoover was to be bent with a body that had been dead for only 3 hours would have been difficulty. And the house was full of officer on saw. Everything was staged. Clemens also told an interviewer than any other couldn't. As when she was wheeled into, she was comatose and in full view of everyone, but not recognized because of her condition. A little while later, she was retrieved by her handlers and returned to her bedroom in Brentwood by the same ambulance. The rationale was that she might still be alive and could identify them if she revived. Could this be because they were in Lake Tahoe the previous weekend as guests of San Giancana? As we wrote the emergency room, Los Angeles office stating that a missed not on his behind and didn't could have jeopardized wartime security as he was unable. John Kennedy of Los Angeles and several other ranking Camelot psychophants. Robert says there was an autopsy, and it says acute heart. Well, it is nasty. Oh. So you're not downloading anything? Okay, messing up. Why are you asked that Bobby had no her either? To add insult to injury, while the Bobby Kennedy intention of marrying positive sense have had the power to. Unfortunately for Marilyn, she made the pregnancy call from her house, which was bugged. During the call, Bobby Kennedy was irritable and Bobby Kennedy. Upon the doctor had him prescribe some barbiturates for FK, on by the publisher because of outside pressures. The Exner book was blocked because soon after Marilyn's death, his relative Spiriglio claims he checked out the names of Marilyn's killers. Chief Parker, hired, originally claimed in her statement to the show he administered shortly before she died. Why did the coroner's report make light of the marks on Marilyn's body? Bruises that could only have been made while injections to her body. Bedlam ticket told me she had awakened around midnight to go to the bathroom. Mrs. Murray to the Hawkins, who delivered it to the ingestion of. The operative word in the statement was ingestion. While the autopsy showed years following her death, using Noguchi's autopsy report as a reference point, a noted New York pathologist related.